This is NDTV, and you're watching Classics.
Hello and welcome to India's Tryst with Destiny, the program in which we get the finest minds in India to look back at the last 6 decades and see where we've gone right and where we've gone wrong. Now, so many institutions in India have crumbled over the last 60 years. But if there's one institution that we are proud of, it's our judicial system and our legal system that backs it. In fact, we often say it's the finest of any developing country. We often compare ourselves with China, and we say the one big difference is that in India, we have a functioning, independent legal system, which they don't have in China. But how fragile is this legal system? For the ordinary man, we face a lot of problems. We face delays, we face corruption. Well, to analyze what's good, what's bad, and what's ugly about India's judiciary and its legal system, we have Fali Nariman, Padma Vibhushan, and one of the finest legal minds this country has ever had. Then, of course, Soli Sorabji, the former Attorney General. Harish Salve, the former Solicitor General. And Rajiv Luthra, recently voted or assessed as one of the top 100 lawyers in the world. And you represent the youth here today, compared to all of us.
I'm just over my teens.
You're just over your teens, right. Now, in this, let's start. We'll divide this into various sections. In the first section, we'd like to look at corruption in the judiciary. How serious is it really? Is it just a perception, or is it deep-rooted? And how do we fix it? Fali, how serious is corruption? Is it, do you know it exists? I mean, or is it just hearsay?
It's one of those things which you smell and detect it by. And I think it is correct to say that there is correlation between perception and reality. There is a substantial amount of corruption even in the judiciary, for the simple reason that men and women who are in other parts of political life are no different from men and women who are in the legal system or in the judiciary itself. But your second point was, how does one tackle this problem?
Right.
Because that's I think the main.
But before we get into that, just to go into, like, what percentage of judges, very roughly, would you say are corrupt? 50%, 30%, 70%?
This is what I was coming to, that we have no mechanism by which
To even tell.
And therefore these rough guesses by former Chief Justices who have said 20, 25%, may be right, may be wrong. I'm not quite sure whether they are right or wrong. And I would respect what they say because they must have read all the files, etc.
25%.
So, yes, so one would perhaps take as a starting point the 25% which Justice Bharucha mentioned when he retired. Maybe that's a good assessment, perhaps, to go on. But that leaves, please remember, that leaves 75% of the judiciary who are above and beyond corruption, which is a very great thing in this country.
Right. But is this just, is it a cancer? Is it serious? Is it only, if it's 25%, that means 75% are honest. So then the perception is worse than the reality. Is that true?
I do not agree with this 25-30. There is no basis. I was present when Justice Bharucha spoke at Pune. It was just off-the-cuff remark. I don't know on what basis is that 30. But the perception...
You've been working for so many years.
I'm coming to that. Perception is not totally unjustified, but it is highly exaggerated if you think it's pervasive across the board.
Say 50% or 70%.
I don't go by percentages.
At what levels?
And exactly.
Right.
That's most important. At what levels? Subordinate judiciary, High Court, Supreme Court.
Let's start with the Supreme Court. Is there corruption in the Supreme Court?
I don't think so at all.
At all. Would you agree with that, Harish?
By and large.
By and large, Supreme
all the
Court, no. And High Court?
High Court, there are problems. And as I was going to say about 25%, to say 25% is wrong for another reason. After being Solicitor General, before that I never did criminal work. After becoming Solicitor General, I was exposed to criminal work. I'm doing a lot of criminal work now. And the state is abysmal.
Abysmal and
Absolutely. The way our criminal justice system works is terrible. It's a system based on embarrassment. It's a system which is an absolute nightmare for anybody who comes across it.
You're talking about because it's corrupt?
One of the reasons is a overwhelming perception of corruption which is not baseless. You see, as Fali rightly said, we have no barometer of corruption. There's no meter which you can plug in and say this court is so much corrupt. But we as lawyers at the same time, you know certain judgments are wrong and you know certain judgments are corrupt because this judge is too clever to have written this kind of a judgment. So we can tell when a judge is corrupt.
And you would put it at more than 25%?
Way above 25% in the subordinate judiciary.
Subordinate judiciary around 50, 60%?
It's very difficult to say, but it's a bad feeling you get.
But
the point is,
right.
Am I satisfied with the way the Indian criminal justice system works? I say a big no.
A big no.
Yes.
But Rajiv, India is a country of conspiracy theories. Everything, there's match fixing when there's no match fixing, there's corruption when there's no. Is it a perception that's being unfair to judges, that actually they are not that corrupt, but we think they are more corrupt than they are? Conspiracy theory again.
Well, my view is that there is certainly a very strong perception about corruption. I haven't seen it or felt it personally, but like Harish was very rightly put it, that you can make out in a judgment that there is corruption. There is something that's been sort of, it's not quite right.
But isn't it true every time a lawyer loses a case, they say, oh, it's corruption?
That's half the problem.
Half the problem.
That's half the problem.
And
Definitely half the problem. We lawyers are as guilty as anybody else
spreading this
of
perception.
spreading
Yes.
this perception.
Entirely.
More than the ordinary people, run of the people. Because we have you lose a case and you tell the client, oh my God, this judge is either hopeless, inefficient, or he's corrupt.
Right.
So then you are off the hook.
Yeah,
it's the judge who's there. And if you
see,
lose
can
all the way, you say this.
You can always say that the judgment was totally wrong, even perverse. But I know some lawyers, senior lawyers, who can never take a defeat. I say, why don't you say the judgment is erroneous? Why do you say the judge was corrupt?
Exactly.
But and if they are
they're
senior
undermining the
lawyers
system.
and they spread this, naturally the client also gets a perception. Right. What I mean to say, if I can sum it up, the perception is not unfounded, but is highly exaggerated.
Right. So even if it's 25%, lawyers claim it's like 60% because they tend to use it as an excuse and spread this perception.
No, I have a problem. With respect, I don't agree with what Soli is saying, that it is exaggerated. The real problem is something else. People respect the judiciary so much. Once it is tainted, there is no measuring how tainted is it. When a litigant goes to court, if he has heard, reputations are built on 100% honesty. Anything less than 100%, the reputation is tarnished. Judiciary is one of those sensitive institutions. You cannot measure that it is 60% corrupt or 60% judges are corrupt. The institution is today not one with which people look at with confidence. When a litigant goes to court, he also starts finding out, how do I get to the judge? Why? This was not so 30 years back, 40 years back. You ask them 40 years back, would a litigant start by saying, we have corporate clients who start by saying, who knows this judge? And we say, get out from here.
And that is why I think, structures is very important. I think we have needed an ombudsman for the judiciary, more than an ombudsman for anything else.
And what would he do, the ombudsman?
And that ombudsman would devise structures and ways and means of ascertaining how people have reacted, and he would be a sort of a communicating rod for all complaints that come directly to him. This can only be private, because the law of contempt otherwise prevents everybody, including the media, from accusing any particular judge of corruption.